Next is Ms. Bender. I thought I was looking on the wrong section of my agenda. Thank you, Ms. Bender.
Good afternoon. My name is Roxanne Bender, and I'm proud to be a fourth-generation resident of El Dorado County. My great-grandfather, H.P. Moulton, helped establish and fund the stamp mill at the Goldbug Mine in Placerville. I am a full-time caregiver to my 38-year-old son. I'm here today to represent IHSS caregivers across this state. I have a great deal of pride and respect for my sisters and brothers that are hardworking and overworked in-home caregivers. We work hard at a very wide range of skills and duties expected of us. We also do the extra things, duties that come with truly caring about our client, not just putting in the hours. This is a valuable and extremely important job we do, and we're doing it better than anyone else could do it for our personal clients. Yet many in decision-making positions do not even know what we do. Through limited understanding and education about how, what, and why we do what we do, our clients, the elderly, disabled, and debilitated people, have no voice to come before you and your leaders. Instead, the vast majority go about with a limited understanding of the wide range of duties we perform, often above and beyond that which is provided for by the client's needs according to the restrictive and unrealistic assessment that is done in 30 to 45 minutes that is mostly paperwork. They do not check the clients specifically. So as I continue, please realize that by the decisions made in the past, your budgets have been cutting hours and wages and denying basic rights, including overtime. This is forcing caregivers such as myself to face impossible choices. Our clients' needs have not shrunk magically. Our own financial responsibilities have not been reduced by 7%. We are not giving 7% less care. We are not giving 7% less baths, feedings, or medications to our clients. What do we cut? There's nothing we can cut. 7% of my hours is just under 20 hours a month. At $9 an hour, that's $180 a month. That cut's important to my family. I've been a caregiver for 38 years. My son, Jacob, was born in 1976 with a brainstem defect. He is unable to do any self-help skills at all. He doesn't even chew. He has no form of communication except eye contact and primal body language. I have been his paid caregiver since 1996, when he turned 20 and was approaching the age that he would no longer be eligible for public school programs. As a single mom at the time, I had to leave my real estate career in order to care for my son. I then earned $4.75 an hour. Now, almost 20 years later, I earn $9 an hour. Through years of cuts, I've had to make many heartbreaking choices. Money has been so tight that I could not afford Christmas or birthday presents for my Jacob this past year and others gone by. Jacob does not know holidays from any other day of the year and doesn't seem to know any differently whether he receives gifts or not. But I know. And as a mother, it breaks my heart. I plan to adopt a special needs child from the time I was 11 years old. I read the Roy Rogers and Dale Evans story, and I wanted to provide that kind of love. A higher power saved me all the red tape, and Jacob is my second-born child. I do this job because he is my son, and I love him. The state's IHSS program recognizes the value in that. For this physically and emotionally exhausting work, I currently earn $9 an hour, minimum wage. I have no retirement benefits, no health care, and no sick days. In addition to the 7% cut to hours, home care providers like me are forced to work without basic equal rights and labor protections. In 2014, workers providing services through IHSS were specifically excluded from legislation granting paid sick leave to nearly every other worker in the state. And a recent federal court ruling has denied us from being eligible for minimum wage and overtime protections under the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act. At some point, anybody here or someone that you love might need a nurturing hand of a caregiver. Particularly as our baby boomers age, we need to respect and nourish our caregiving workforce rather than turn our backs on it. It is said by Ain Jin Poo in her book titled The Age of Dignity, and I quote, "By 2035, the number of Americans over the age of 85 will more than double to 11.5 million people," end quote. IHSS offers this segment of the population the dignity to stay in their own homes, loved, safe, and cared for. Ironically, working for IHSS allows me to actually save the government a great deal of money because I can do it better than anyone else, including a full staff of strangers in a high-priced facility. The annual fee-for-service cost for an individual in a skilled nursing facility is more than $65,000, while the annual cost for someone with average number of IHS hours is closer to $13,000, according to the Legislative Analyst Office. And also, ironically, if I worked at an institution, I would be earning overtime, paid sick leave, and other benefits. I've had to make a lot of hard choices. I've had to choose between paying certain living expenses and providing a nutritious, protein-filled diet for Jacob. I was counting on the promise of overtime pay to help get a more reliable and safe transportation for Jacob. My colleagues and I do not deserve to feel like second-class citizens rather than the hardworking, gainfully employed members of the community that we truly are. We have always, and we will continue to, fight to protect all providers and all clients. Please do not force us to make these hard choices, and please do not leave our clients without services that they need. California should move forward as soon as possible with implementing overtime pay and other labor protections for IHS workers without compromising or reducing any hours of support for IHSS workers. And it should do so in a way that does not prevent consumers of IHSS and other Medicaid waivers from getting the care they need from providers of their own choosing in their own homes. Know this, please. We are no longer asking to be heard, respected, and treated fairly. We are here to tell this legislature and the governor, it's no longer about making the right choice. It's time to just do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bender. Excellent testimony. We appreciate you. Moving on to Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. Good to see you, Senator Mitchell.
Same here, sir.
Senator Stone, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Greg Thompson. I'm representing the LA County Public Authority and the California Association for Public Authorities. As you know, there's 58 counties, and so CAPA represents most of those. I'm here today to ask you to help the governor do the right thing and restore the 7% cut to IHSS. I realize that this has been included in the budget, and however, I think it should not be contingent on approval of the managed care organizational tax. The 7% cut to IHSS must be restored regardless of what happens with the MCO tax, because it's the right thing to do, just like it's the right thing to do to restore the SSI and SSP. People with disabilities have been helping to balance the budget on their back for too many years here in California. The 7% cut across the board in IHSS hurt consumers and providers. The consumer assessed as needing the average number of monthly hours lost 6 of those hours, the time which was needed for laundry, bathing, grocery shopping. A consumer who was assessed as needing the maximum hours, 283, lost 20 hours of help per month, more than 2 days of personal care or domestic services. The need didn't go away and the work didn't go away, but the money did. As you are aware, IHSS has increased significantly and has become very expensive, and this has made it a target for budget over the last several years. However, this doesn't mean that it's not still effective, and this doesn't mean that it's not still keeping people out of nursing homes and living independently in their community. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for most of the individuals on IHSS to travel to Sacramento and testify today. But nevertheless, you need to hear their stories. And what we've tried to do in Los Angeles is a couple of things. One, we interviewed several people on IHSS, and we made a short 5-minute video, which I left in your office my last visit, Senator Mitchell, and Ms. Liu has one, or you could go to the website, pasc.org, and I really strongly encourage you to watch that video. Another thing that we did is we surveyed members of our registry. We asked the question, we simply worded it, the governor and the California state legislature are thinking about giving you back the IHS hours they cut. Help us convince them to give you back the 7% they took by telling us how these cuts affected you. Did the 7% cuts leave you less time for bathing and grooming? And 68% said yes. Bowel and bladder care, 46% said yes. Help with transfers and moving in bed, 40%. Shopping and meals, 70%. And I want to read, and we also asked them to make comments, and I will make sure you get this document, but I just wanted to read an example of one comment they left. I'm supposed to be turned every 3 hours, and with the 7% cut in hours, I've had to miss 2 of these turnings over the past year. I have been hospitalized for bed sores several times, and I worry that it will happen again if I can't get turned every 3 hours, every 3 hours that the doctor has ordered. I also brought testimony from the IHSS Consumers Union. It's a group in Los Angeles whose members are extremely passionate about IHSS because they depend on it to stay out of nursing homes. And they have a couple of things that they wanted me to share. First and foremost, restore the 7% cut to IHSS. Enough SSI for seniors and people with disabilities to live outside institutions. A living wage across the county, throughout California, instituting an automatic 1.5 increase current and future minimum wage rate to pay IHSS workers. And they have a couple of other things that I'll make sure you get this list too, but one of the things I thought is very interesting is they recommend that you change the name from in-home supportive services to community living services, which I think sort of describes the program much better. We certainly support fair wages and labor for the providers, as Ms. Bender's testimony so eloquently described. They work very, very hard, but not with the restrictions and the cap that the governor put on the overtime. As you heard earlier, 73% of people, of the providers are family members, and these are the ones that will be hurt. People that have maybe more than one family member that they take care of would lose hours or be forced to hire somebody outside the home. And there are actually penalties in there with, you know, after so many mistakes on your time card, you could actually be fired. And there's so many issues with IHSS and CalMedi Connect and CMIPS that need to be fixed. We really encourage you, to focus on that. We deal so much with providers, late time cards, or difficulty getting their criminal background checks, which is one of the mandates that a public authority has, we run a local registry and we work on the background checks, and we receive thousands of background checks in Los Angeles. Last year, the Department of Justice processed 193,000 criminal background checks, and 75% of those were done within 30 days. But that left, and then there were actually 100 that took over 145 days. In Los Angeles, we had several that took over a year. But that also left a gap of about 20,000 providers that had to wait anywhere from 60 to 90 to 120 days to get their background check and possibly get their first paycheck. So CAPA has submitted a bill, and that we hopefully might, ask for your support on this at another time, but we think that the money that the DOJ gets for the background checks should actually go to the Department of Justice. The way the program works is a provider has to actually pay for their background check, which is another thing that we might want to consider. I've had multiple jobs in my life, and my employer has always paid for my background check. But a provider has to go get a background check in Los Angeles, one of 250 vendors, and they could pay a rolling fee as high as $60. Then they pay another fee of, I believe, $32 that we're suggesting in the CAPA bill it would go to Department of Justice to help get rid of some of these delays. Providers shouldn't have to wait 6 months to a year for their first paycheck, and they shouldn't have time over. And part of the Federal Labor and Standards Act new rule and overtime forced CMIPs to create a whole different time card system in order to try to put these caps on the providers, and it created a ton of problems, and so that also needs to be fixed. Thank you very much for your time.
Quick question, please. Are background checks required if you're a family member providing the service?
Anybody to get paid by IHSS has to pass a background check.
Okay.
And
Thank
that's
you.
one of the things that the Consumers Union in Los Angeles is suggesting, is that the background checks could be optional for maybe family members.
Because I think there is precedent in other programs in subsidized childcare, as I recall. And I think in foster care, if you're a family member, background checks aren't required. But my memory could be foggy. But okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Mr. Rollins, thank you for pinch hitting. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Russell Rawlings. I've been a Sacramento area resident since 2001. Previously, I was in Houston, Texas. I grew up in Texas, and I can tell you that the situation there is a lot different. You know, I consider myself extremely fortunate. I am a very privileged individual in many ways. My family struggled to work as a middle-class family. They received little to no state support whatsoever. They both worked full-time jobs, and as a result, they had the privilege of paying over half of all of my medical costs and durable medical equipment through the insurance that they were fortunately able to have. When I became an adult, you know, there were a lot of things that I needed to learn how to do. And living independently was one of those things. As much as I credit my parents, you know, there were just things that I did not know, you know, how to do. And quite honestly, transportation was a big part of that. And you know, fortunately, through a series of events, I was able to end up here in Sacramento. And I can tell you that in many ways, Sacramento and California in general have given me the opportunity to live a productive life. And although I'm still struggling and trying to finish with school, even at 38, I am almost there. And I really feel like I have some really big opportunities ahead of me. I am an IHSS recipient and have been since moving here. And I consider myself very fortunate to have some excellent caregivers that I have been able to find, and it was not easy, let me tell you. These people, you know, the IHSS workers are paid minimum wage or just slightly above in some areas. And this is a poverty wage. You know, these people are living in poverty, and they're working some of the hardest jobs and most physically demanding jobs. And my caregiver has not only herself, but her son and her grandmother to support. So this is, you know, these are real folks that are working hard. So it only makes sense that the governor would try to, you know, help find solutions to get these folks some extra, you know, protections like overtime and other things. But, you know, it can't be done at you can't pit the needs of the care provider against the needs of those that are being cared for. That's the most important thing. The second thing is I have been here for all of these, the cuts in hours, service hours. So I've seen my own hours go down slowly, and my caregiver has picked up additional clients. So she's working harder, and I am fortunate to maintain the level of care that I've been able to maintain. You know, at the time we were told, oh, this is temporary. Once things get back to, you know, once the economy turns around, things will get better. Well, guess what? We're here, and things aren't getting better. So I would really recommend that the 7% restoration happen now, and you know, the money's here. So there are other places that the money for this, you know, these rainy day funds and other things, they can come from elsewhere. This was the only population that was targeted this directly with a cut. So this needs to be the first to see a turnaround of that. Additionally, I was just informed, and this is something that could potentially affect me in the future, the IHSS share of cost buyout. And this is a system that I apologize, I'm not an expert, but I do know that for certain individuals that make more than that is allowable under the income guidelines, that they pay a share of cost back into the system. And you've got a large number of individuals that are at a point where through inheritance or some other means, they are at that point, but they're not actually earning money. So, you know, it's kind of like they're receiving this money, but it's not infinite. And it's taking them all the way down to where they are only receiving $600 a month. So this is you know, you're talking about basically putting people in nursing homes and giving them no way out. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Olmstead Act prevents this from happening. So this is a direct Olmstead violation. And I really think that this needs to be dealt with immediately. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rollins. Appreciate you. Ms. Doctor, you'll be the closer today.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell, and members of the committee. I'm going to talk about 3 issues, talk about them all briefly, but I want to start by saying again what Russell said and what I said talking about SSI, that community living is not just a good idea, it's the law. The Americans with Disabilities Act, whose 25th anniversary will be on July 26th.
Wow.
Yes, I was there for the signing. It says that people with disabilities have a right to receive services in the most integrated setting. And the Olmstead decision in June of 1999 confirmed that. All of the issues that we've talked about today are issues that affect whether or not people can actually live in the community or whether we have policies that drive them into institutions. On the first issue of the overtime, as Robert Harris said, we had been working to try to get some exceptions. I'm reminded of that, what is that expression, marry in haste, repent in leisure? This was sort of like legislate in haste and repent over many, many more months on the overtime law, because there were things that none of us anticipated. But there are people, dozens and dozens of people who've come to Disability Rights California because the restrictions on the work week would have been disastrous for them and would have forced people into institutions. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We've had 2 situations where an adult man gave up his job to go move in with his elderly parents, who are both on IHSS, both with dementia. He's the only caregiver that they trust. He depends on the IHSS income. Their hours come to more than 66 per week. So he's faced with a cut in his hours, which means he then has to go get another job, which means that his parents are going to nursing homes. He was clear about it. There was no other solution. His parents will not allow somebody else to take care of them, and he needs the income to keep them all in a household. We've had a woman who takes care of her sister with severe disabilities and her father who was dying. Same situation. She should be allowed to continue to take care of them. She's their chosen caregiver. And so we appreciate efforts to protect parents who have more than one child with disabilities, but the group is a little bigger than that. So we'd love to work with you. We think the right way to do this is actually to amend the legislation, most straightforward way. The second issue is the share of cost buyout, which Russell explained thoroughly. It leaves some people not with SSI, and we just heard hours of how difficult that is. It leaves people who have income above SSI, maybe they're on SSDI, they have to pay a share of costs that brings them to $600 a month. If people can't live on $889 a month, how are they to live on $600 a month? And this was a change that was made, I think, in 2012. The state used to buy out their share of costs, so their share of costs went down to the SSI level. Now it goes down to the medically needy level. When we talk about able to live in the community, this is a complete disincentive. It makes it impossible for people to stay at home. And for people who are in nursing homes who would like to get out, they can't do that. $600 a month isn't happening. So we urge you to reverse this and reinstate the share of cost buyout. The last issue is, of course, the restoration of the 7%, which shouldn't be tied to anything because it's the right thing to do and the money is there. And these are the same folks whose SSI got cut, whose Medi-Cal may have gotten cut. They have taken more than their share of hits, and they need to get this money restored. IHSS is a bargain. It is 1/5 generally of the cost of nursing homes, and I would just point out to you that the nursing homes haven't been made to wait contingent on something for their increases, and we are paying them more than $1 billion a year more than we were 10 years ago with no increase in caseload. So I urge you to observe what the federal law tells us, and by the way, the Federal Department of Labor just this week sent a second letter to the governors which says to them, if you implement overtime, remember your obligations under the ADA and Olmstead and have exceptions which allow for people's individual circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does Senator Stone, Senator Monty, any questions of this panel? Thank you very much. Appreciate you. We'll ask the department to come back. Got it. As the department returns, before I open it up to public comment, I have a quick question with regard to minimum wage. And if you have budgeted for the various counties who have increased their minimum wage, how you accommodate for that? Minimum wage or counties or that have perhaps implemented paid sick day ordinances? Has that been factored into the budget for IHSS at the state level?
The very short answer is yes. The wages are collectively bargained at the local level, but when the state raises the minimum, anybody not at the minimum, we raise the budget for that as an automatic adjustment.
Okay.
Yeah. If I may, Chair Mitchell, there was a
Yes.
conversation briefly about fingerprinting as well. I just wanted to make clear, we fingerprint everybody in the IHSS program. It's a condition of receiving the federal funding. If the background check comes back with something, this is a consumer-driven program, so there is an option for the recipient to sign a Tier 1 or Tier 2 waiver to allow that person to continue as a provider at state-only expense. But as a condition of FFP in the program, we do background 100% of the people applying to be providers.
And in the event, if I, as a consumer, choose to have Senator Stone continue to be my IHSS care provider, then it's state only, no federal dollars.
That's correct, with the exception of the Tier 1 crimes.
And then that's not the case. Do you know about the child, in the subsidized child care and foster care?
In subsidized child care, the rules are a little bit different. It's not Medicaid funded. So the Child Care and Development Block Grant allows both licensed providers and then license exempt providers. And we treat, and then we have a separate trust line process for the license exempt providers, but very close family members, and I don't have the list in front of me, are also exempt from that process. So it's a little bit different by program.
And primarily because of the federal requirement. That's a big difference.
In IHSS, the fingerprinting is driven by the federal Medicaid requirement to be you are a Medicaid provider as an IHSS provider.
Got it. Got it.
And if it's helpful, I'd like to clarify about the share of cost issue.
Please.
Share of cost is determined under the Medi-Cal program. It's part of their eligibility process, and it's determined between them and CMS. IHSS does not do it. It's simply, if they want to participate in our program, they fall into the medically needy
It's a
program.
Medi-Cal issue.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else that you wanted to comment on based on the previous panel? Monty, Senator Stone? Nothing? Okay. Thank you. We'll open up to public comment. Please, 2 minutes each.
Good afternoon, elected officials. My name is Gregory Fields, and I am an in-home supportive care worker. To the former panel that was just there speaking to this issue, I say ditto. Also, I'd like to say, as a home care provider, I'm sitting here listening to what has been shared by the department, what has been shared by the panel, questions that have been asked by the elected officials, and running through my mind all of the things that I deal with on a daily basis, and taking into consideration the cuts that have been made, the promises that have been made, the requests that have been made. And all I ask that you tell to Governor Jerry Brown is that we are in a blizzard. When is he going to use the rainy day fund to assist the very people who he asked to elect him to office, the very people who he asked to get Proposition 30 passed so that the funds could be raised for this very issue that he promised he would address? So we ask you very, very faithfully to just be diligent, have your colleagues stand with you, and demand upon the governor to do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next witness, please. 2 minutes.
Hello, Ms. Mitchell again. It's Rick Hodgkins again. I would say next time I'd like to be on a panel at one of these hearings rather than just doing public comment. We're not, recipients and providers are not deadbeats like the current governor and previous governors thought. The providers should be getting paid not only a salary, a certain figure, but also should get health benefits and so on. If President Obama wants every state to pay overtime, then they need to do that. I understand that Miss Bender has a son. They live in El Dorado County. If her son's developmentally disabled, eventually she may want to think about putting him in supported living instead of a care home because, and speaking of overtime, this not only affects IHSS providers, this also protects supported living providers. And I know the California Supported Living Network would say the same thing. And as I told Ms. Yamada in her hearings of aging and long-term care, if I can't remain in my home, I would probably not want to live at all. I would take my own life. And finally, what good is Prop 98 without the social programs to protect people that need an education as well? Thank you.
I agree with that. Next witness, I'm going to ask everyone to really be to exert self-discipline in the 2 minutes, because I know we've had a long hearing and we have a long agenda to go. Thank you. Next witness.